A week ago, I started working from home so I could help take care of my stepson, who says he hurt his back in a work accident. He's 25 and has been living on his own since he finished trade school 5 years ago. He works as an electrician and rents a place about an hour away from us. I've known him for 6 years and have been married to his dad for 4 of those years. When I first met his dad, my stepson was pretty distant. His parents had only been divorced for about a year and a half, and he wasn't ready to see his dad with someone new. Our early interactions were pretty awkward. He'd give me short answers, avoid eye contact, and sit as far from me as possible during family dinners. Once, when I offered to help him move furniture into his first apartment after trade school, he asked his dad to come alone instead. Over time, though, we developed a decent relationship, nothing super close but respectful. He started acknowledging me at family events, sometimes asked about my job in healthcare, and even remembered my birthday last year with a card he bought from the store. But things shifted 3 months ago when he came over for the weekend and got into a big argument with his dad. They were in the garage looking at my husband's latest motorcycle project when their voices started getting louder. I stayed in the kitchen, not wanting to get in the middle of it, but I could hear things getting tense. My stepson ended up storming out, grabbing his bag, and leaving without saying goodbye. Later, my husband told me that our son had accused him of caring more about our marriage than he ever did about his first one. He said his dad always put his hobbies, like restoring old motorcycles, ahead of family time, which is what eventually pushed his mom away. Apparently, my husband used to spend most of his free time in the garage working on bikes, missing school events and family stuff. His ex-wife felt neglected and raised their son mostly on her own. She wanted him to be more involved with the family, but he kept saying his hobby could bring in extra money if he sold the bikes he fixed. He'd drop hundreds of dollars every month on rare motorcycle parts, especially for bikes from the 60s and 70s. He was super into it. He joined 3 different restoration clubs and went to meetups twice a month. During the summer, he'd travel to motorcycle shows, sometimes staying overnight in other states. Meanwhile, his ex-wife was handling pretty much everything for their son, school stuff, doctor's appointments, and after-school activities, with very little help from him. Money was a big issue because his ex-wife had a habit of overspending. She came from a wealthy family and was used to having nice things, so she'd buy expensive clothes and fancy home decor, even though they were on a middle-class budget. She often had to borrow money from her parents to make ends meet. Their house was full of designer furniture, high-end appliances, and artwork, which put a lot of strain on their finances. Her parents didn't like this and would make comments about how a real provider wouldn't let their daughter struggle like that. One Thanksgiving, her brother even gave my husband a book on financial management as a joke gift in front of everyone, which was pretty embarrassing. His motorcycle hobby became a lightning rod for criticism. His ex-wife saw it as selfish, especially when she was stressed about money. They fought more and more about how he spent his time and money, and even though they'd been together since they were 19, they split up when their son turned 20. By then, their son had already taken his mom's side, blaming his dad's absence and his obsession with motorcycles for most of their family's problems. During the divorce, my husband's ex-wife claimed she had given up career opportunities to focus on raising their son, even though she had worked part-time during their marriage. In the end, she got a large share of their assets, including half of my husband's retirement savings. After the divorce, my husband's life changed a lot when we started dating 2 years later. He still works on motorcycles, but only one evening a week and some Saturdays. He makes more time for us now. We travel, try new restaurants, and he even joined a cooking class with me, though he's not exactly a natural in the kitchen. He's also great about attending my family events and engaging with everyone. I really appreciate how much effort he puts into our relationship, but I can see why his son might feel upset seeing his dad become more balanced and present after the divorce. Things got worse between them after an argument 3 months ago. Since then, my stepson hasn't visited, didn't call on his dad's birthday, and skipped Thanksgiving with us. Then, last week, we got a call saying he'd hurt his back at work. He claimed he slipped on the job and needed help while recovering. According to him, the doctor ordered 2 weeks of bed rest and limited movement, so he couldn't cook or drive himself to appointments. He was supposed to stay with his mom, but she said she was traveling for work and wouldn't be back for weeks. My husband reached out to me, and even though I was swamped with work deadlines, I adjusted my schedule to work from home and help care for him during the day while my husband was at work. My husband suggested hiring a professional caregiver, but I wanted to help personally, hoping it might help fix our strained relationship. For 3 days, I cooked his meals, drove him to what he said was a doctor's appointment, picked up his prescriptions, and rearranged my work meetings to fit his needs. I even made his favorite meal, steak with roasted potatoes, and set up a TV in the guest room so he could watch sports. I bought extra pillows, downloaded books for him to read, and even ordered a memory foam mattress topper overnight when he complained the bed was too firm. I tried to make him as comfortable as possible while juggling my own work responsibilities. Yesterday morning, I came back from grabbing breakfast at a local bakery and overheard my stepson talking loudly on the phone in his room. I stopped outside the door when I heard my name. He was on the phone with his mom, laughing about how easily we'd fallen for his act. I pulled out my phone and started recording. He told her he was applying for new jobs but was dragging this out as long as he could because he felt he deserved to be taken care of after how his dad had treated them. He even said he enjoyed watching me run around like a servant when he could actually do everything himself. He admitted he'd been faking a limp when people were around but moved normally when no one was watching. He laughed about the memory foam topper I bought, calling it an unexpected bonus to his plan. When his mom asked how long he planned to keep this up, he said, "At least a month. Why not? Dad owes us after all those years he spent in the garage while we struggled." I left the house right away and called my husband. I sent him the recording and explained what I'd heard. He closed his shop early and came home within 40 minutes. We confronted my stepson together. At first, he denied everything, but when I played the recording, he couldn't keep lying. After making a few weak excuses, he finally came clean. He'd been fired from his job as an electrician for showing up drunk at a customer's house. The customer, who had young kids, reported him to his boss, and he was let go on the spot. He was afraid his dad would lecture him about responsibility if he told the truth. Even though he had enough savings to cover rent for another month, he didn't want to spend it when he could just live with us instead. Originally, he planned to stay with his mom, but she's been seeing someone new and wanted privacy. So, they made up the story about her being on a business trip and faked the back injury to make sure we take him in without asking too many questions. The whole thing was carefully planned. He even looked up common back injury symptoms online to make his act believable. The doctor's appointment I drove him to was actually a meeting with a friend who works in medical billing, and that's how he got a back brace and fake medical documents. The prescription I filled was written by a doctor his mom knows socially, who agreed to prescribe mild painkillers without even examining him, which, by the way, is totally illegal. My husband was upset but said if his son had just been honest about losing his job, we would have helped him out. He even mentioned offering him some temporary work at his shop while he looked for a new job in his field. But the way his son lied, especially making me change my work schedule for no reason, was too much. My husband told him he had to leave our house by the next day. My stepson got defensive and blamed me for messing up his relationship with his dad. He said I'd changed his father and made him pick his new family over his real one. He brought up how, 2 Christmases ago, my husband went to my family's gathering instead of his ex-wife's, saying it proved his dad's priorities had shifted. He even claimed his dad had gone soft since marrying me, giving up his passion for motorcycles, which used to be a big part of who he was. That comment was the last straw for me, especially after everything I'd done to help him. I told him he and his mom were both manipulative and selfish. I said that even if his mom didn't care about my husband anymore, a son should still respect his father. I called them freeloaders who only cared about what they could get from him. I reminded him how his mom used to complain about my husband's motorcycle hobby, but now they were criticizing him for spending less time on it. I also brought up all the times my husband had helped him financially after trade school, like paying for his apartment deposit and buying him tools for work. In the heat of the moment, I said that as long as I was in his dad's life, I'd make sure he never took advantage of him again, even if it meant pushing his dad to cut him out completely. My stepson didn't say anything after that. He just closed his bedroom door and stayed in his room for the rest of the night. The next morning, he was gone. He'd taken all his things, cleaned the guest room, stripped the bed, and folded the linens neatly. He even put the memory foam topper back in its original packaging. He left his house key on the kitchen counter with a note that just said, "Thanks for letting me stay." We thought everything was settled until his mom started blowing up our phones with texts and calls. She demanded I apologize for how I spoke to her son, saying I had no right to get involved in family matters because I wasn't real family. She kept calling my husband's shop so much that he had to tell his employees to screen calls. She even sent long emails trying to justify her son's behavior, blaming my husband for past mistakes. We blocked her number, but she didn't stop. She reached out through other family members and even showed up at my husband's shop. When she came to the shop, she made a scene, knocking over a display and demanding to talk to my husband in front of customers. His employee called the police when she wouldn't leave, though she took off before they got there. She left a handwritten letter on his car, listing all the ways she thought he'd failed as a father and husband, and ended it with a threat to make him pay for letting me disrespect her son. My husband agrees I was harsh but thinks his son's actions deserved a strong reaction. Still, he's uneasy about what I said about cutting his son out of our lives. He feels it came off as controlling and like I overstepped. While I stand by most of what I said, I can see now that that particular comment went too far. Update 1. Thanks to everyone who shared their thoughts on my post. I want to clear something up. It's natural for parents to feel protective of their kids, no matter how they act. My husband's mixed emotions about how I handled things with his son make sense. If I were in his shoes, I'd probably feel torn too. This isn't about him versus me. We're both just trying to figure out how to deal with what happened. Please don't blame my husband in the comments. He's not at fault here. After taking a couple of days to think things over, my husband and I talked through everything. I admitted that saying I'd cut his son out of our lives was too harsh, but I also stood by my decision not to apologize given how things played out. My husband agreed that no apology was needed. In fact, he thinks his son should be the one apologizing to both of us, especially since I changed my work schedule to take care of him. My husband also agreed with what I noticed about his son's behavior. It's a lot like his ex-wife's entitled attitude. He's been worried about this for years, but let it slide because he loves his son. During our talk, he got emotional talking about how hard he tried to raise his son to be responsible, only to feel like his ex-wife undid a lot of that. He even blamed himself a little, saying that maybe if he'd been around more during his son's teenage years, things might have turned out differently. He wondered if balancing his hobbies and family life better could have helped his son develop better values. He also shared a memory about how his son used to be interested in motorcycles. Every now and then, his son would join him in the garage to learn basic maintenance. When his son was 15, he asked for a small motorcycle of his own, but his mom shut it down right away, saying it was too dangerous. Instead of encouraging his interest, she signed him up for tennis and debate club, which kept him busy on weekends and away from the garage. When my husband missed some of his son's tournaments because of motorcycle shows, it only made things worse, making it seem like his hobby was more important than his son. I told my husband he shouldn't blame himself entirely. Back then, he was working long hours as a mechanical engineer and later started his own motorcycle repair business. His hobby wasn't just for fun. It helped him unwind and manage stress. Plus, he always made sure to meet their financial responsibilities and even contributed to his son's college fund. Working on motorcycles also kept him at home instead of going out with friends or coworkers, which was his way of staying close to family. The problem was, his ex-wife didn't want to adjust her spending, even when money was tight. She'd redecorate their living room every year, buy new cars every couple of years, and insist on fancy vacations that took months to save for. Even though they had a decent middle-class income, she always wanted luxury stuff and experiences that pushed their budget to the limit. Whenever my husband suggested more affordable options, she'd accuse him of holding her back from the lifestyle she thought she deserved. Her parents didn't help either. At family gatherings, they'd make comments about how my husband couldn't give their daughter the kind of life she was used to. They'd compare her childhood home to her married life, which only added to the pressure. Instead of adjusting to their financial reality, his ex-wife started borrowing money from her parents. These loans were never official, so her parents would bring them up all the time as proof that my husband wasn't good enough. To make up for it, my husband took on even more work to reduce their reliance on her family, but that meant he had less time at home. I reminded him that even now, with their son grown up, his ex-wife could have encouraged him to be honest and responsible. Instead, she went along with his bad behavior. Their son needs guidance, but his mom keeps enabling him. At some point, he'll have to realize that his mom isn't really looking out for him. She's just using him to get back at his dad. My husband told me that during the divorce, his ex-wife would often change visitation plans at the last minute, saying their son had school or extracurricular activities. When he tried to go to school events on his own, he'd often find out they'd been rescheduled or canceled without him knowing. His ex-wife controlled all the information about their son's life, which made it hard for him to be involved. At the same time, she'd criticize him for not being around enough. We've decided to stop responding to his ex-wife's messages. Arguing with her or trying to defend ourselves would just keep the drama going. At this point, it's up to their son to decide what he wants to do, whether he'll apologize and work on fixing things with us or keep following his mom's lead. The ball is in his court. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks since my last update. For days after I posted it, my husband's ex-wife showed up unannounced at our house at 7:30 in the morning on a Saturday. When I answered the door, she demanded to know why we were ignoring her messages. I told her neither my husband nor I wanted to talk to her, but she pushed past me into the house and started yelling for my husband. I didn't hold back. I told her she had no right to barge into our home. She fired back, saying this was about her family and that I didn't belong in the conversation. She even called me the second wife instead of using my name and said I should know my place in my husband's life. Before my husband could get to the door, I reminded her that while this used to be her home and family, things changed when I married her ex. I also brought up how I'd taken care of her son while he faked an injury, cooking for him, rearranging furniture, and adjusting my work schedule, all while he and his mom were lying to me. I told her that gave me every right to speak up about his behavior. When my husband finally stepped in, he told her firmly to leave and that he had nothing to say to her. She got even more worked up, accusing him of being unreasonable and saying he should put his son before me. She brought up old stuff from their marriage, like how he used to prioritize motorcycle events over family, and claimed it proved he never cared about family. When he didn't respond, she ran out of things to say, started cursing, and finally left. As she walked out, she threatened to make sure my husband never sees his son again. That just confirmed what I already knew. She sees her son as a way to control my husband, not as a person with his own needs. We decided to reach out to my stepson directly to let him know what his mom had said and explain that she was using him as a way to hurt his dad because of her lingering bitterness. My husband also sent him a long message sharing his side of their family history. He talked about the financial struggles he faced during their marriage, his ex-wife's unrealistic expectations, and admitted where he'd fallen short, like not being around enough for family stuff. He explained why his son might feel closer to his mom and distant from him, but made it clear that a good parent wouldn't encourage lying or manipulation. He brought up some special memories he had from his son's childhood, like teaching him to ride a bike, building a treehouse together one summer, and going to his high school graduation. He even mentioned keeping photos of those moments in his shop office and looking at them often. He told his son he loved him, despite everything that had happened, and reminded him that he'd always been there to support him financially and emotionally when asked, like helping him apply to trade school and buy his first set of professional tools. He admitted he regretted not being more present during his son's younger years, but said he really wanted to rebuild their relationship now. He ended the message by saying he'd respect whatever his son decided about staying in touch, but hoped they could work things out. We didn't hear back for almost 2 weeks. Then, yesterday, my stepson finally replied. He apologized for how he'd acted, saying he knew he'd been immature. He explained that even though he was an adult when his parents split, it still hit him hard. Seeing his dad change his habits for a new relationship, when he hadn't done the same for his mom, made him feel resentful. The fact that his dad's second marriage seemed so much easier made him wonder if his dad had ever really tried in his first one. He admitted that his mom had given him bad advice and said they'd been arguing a lot about the situation. She'd been pressuring him to keep his distance from his dad as long as I was around, saying that reconnecting with him would be a betrayal of her. After reading his dad's message, though, he felt truly sorry and asked for another chance. He also shared that he'd landed a job interview with another electrical contractor and wanted to tell his dad about it in person. We invited him over for dinner this weekend so we can talk everything through face-to-face. Update 3. The dinner with my stepson went way better than we thought it would. He showed up right on time with flowers and a gift basket full of local treats. Felt like a lot, but it showed how much he meant it. As soon as he walked in, he started apologizing to both of us. He hugged his dad for a long time, saying over and over how sorry he was for what he'd done. He also told us what had happened after our big argument. Turns out, he hadn't been staying with his mom like we thought. She'd made it clear she was living with her new boyfriend and didn't want him around, saying it would mess with her privacy. All that stuff about her traveling for work? Completely made up. She was just helping him lie to us. Instead, he'd been crashing on a friend's couch, looking for a job and only talking to his mom on the phone now and then. He said my blunt words had hit him hard, not because they were mean, but because they were true. He admitted that what I'd said made him rethink how he'd been acting and how much his mom had influenced him. When he thought about apologizing to us, his mom actually tried to stop him, and they ended up arguing about it. But after getting his dad's message explaining his side of the family history, he started to see things differently. For the first time, he really questioned his relationship with his mom. He told us that ever since his parents split up, his mom had always painted his dad as the bad guy, selfish, emotionally distant, and more into his motorcycle than his family. She used his dad's hobby as proof he didn't care about them, and that stuck with him growing up. It shaped how he saw his dad, making him believe his dad was the reason their family fell apart. When I started dating his dad, his mom ramped up her criticism. She claimed his dad never really cared about family life and hinted that he might have been seeing other people even before they split up. She also pointed out how my husband was willing to change his schedule for me, saying it proved he could have been there for them all along but chose not to be. Since my stepson already felt distant from his dad because of work and his hobbies, these accusations seemed to make sense. His mom used that distance to drive an even bigger wedge between them. Now, my stepson has decided to take a step back from his mom while he works on fixing things with his dad. He mentioned that her new boyfriend seems pretty controlling, making decisions for her without even asking, which is kind of ironic since that's exactly what she used to accuse my husband of doing. On top of that, he's landed a job interview with another electrical contractor and is focusing on building his own life. After dinner, he asked to check out his dad's latest motorcycle project. They ended up spending over an hour in the garage talking about restoration tips, which felt like a big step toward finding some common ground. I've forgiven him completely. At 25, he's still figuring things out, and the whole loyalty to family thing really messed with his head. We all make mistakes, especially when things are complicated. What matters is that he's owning up to his actions and trying to make things right. My husband seems really happy to have this chance to reconnect with his son, and I'm feeling good about where we're headed as a family. Last weekend, my stepson came with us to a local motorcycle show where my husband was showing off his latest restoration. It was the first time they'd gone to something like that together in years, and seeing them chat with other enthusiasts about the technical stuff was really encouraging. We've also decided to start having monthly dinners to keep the communication going without any pressure. For the first time since I've known them, their conversations felt easy and natural, no tension hanging over them. It's a fresh start, and I'm hopeful for what's ahead.